and Sports here, just outside of Hartford, Connecticut, on a nice day, hopefully. Uh, we are here to do a Stanley Cup final prediction video for the 2020. As you know, tomorrow night starts Game One of the 2020 Stanley Cup final. Me, myself, Patrick, alongside Eric. Eric, how you doing today?
Doing good. How you doing?
Pretty good. So basically, we're going to go through the series on both the East and West that led up to the prediction. As you know, the teams, and we'll get to that once we finish our recaps here. And I'll start with the West, real quick, just a series by series, how things went, and then any notable takeaways, and then Eric will do the East. And then from there, we'll bring it back to the finalists on each side, and we'll go from there and talk about those predictions and cup winners. So, let me just get this game started. By the way, I'm simming the final, even though it's like a year-old game. We'll see what happens here. But so as you know, in the Western Conference, there were a couple. We're obviously skipping the play-in rounds. We're starting with the official round one, which is the round of 16. Um, so starting with the Western Conference, um, no, as you know, there were some notable teams that passed the play-in round to get to the actual Cup of 16. One of the surprising ones in the West was the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, unlucky for them in the first round, obviously Chicago was the number 8 seed. They ended up playing the number first seed, um, which was the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, the Vegas Golden Knights, obviously being one of the teams expected to go pretty much all the way through to the conference final, if not the Stanley Cup final. Um, so there was definitely going to be a big leaning on the side for the for the Vegas Golden Knights to easily get away with this series. There was a couple surprising things in this series. The Chicago Blackhawks players performed decently well, but they couldn't outlast at all to near what the Golden Knights' physicality was in terms of players like Ryan Reeves. And you're talking about the skill of players like Matt Pacioretty, which is Mark Stone, some of the best people. So obviously, this series went in the Vegas Golden Knights' favor by winning the series 4-1. Um, so yeah, so basically to sum up that series, Chicago kind of knew they were coming into a big challenge. They had some decent players that pulled up a nice win in one of the games, but it was definitely not enough for them to handle because Vegas definitely outlasted them physically and skillfully on the ice. And obviously, these are all at neutral site homes because all the West games are in Edmonton, and Eric will tell you where the Eastern games were when he gets to his things. Um, so that's that one there. So Vegas wins that one and moves on to the second round. Going to the next series, we have the Colorado Avalanche, which is another team almost just as good as Vegas, expected to go decently far after their last run the last couple of years, versus the Arizona Coyotes that have been out of the playoffs for a couple seasons, but they could have been ones that people expected to pull out of the hat and have a chance to get past the first round. But just like the Blackhawks, they were unlucky because the Colorado Avalanche, with the help of Nathan MacKinnon and obviously Cale Makar, which was the star coming out of last year's playoffs, that provided a lot of points. These guys put up not only numbers but skillful plays and clearly kind of outplayed the Coyotes. So that series was also won 4-1, 4-1 by the Avalanche, letting them move forward past round one. All right, and then going on to the next, the third of the four first round games in the West, we have the Dallas Stars facing the Calgary Flames. Now, I don't know if you watched my prediction videos, but back when we did that a couple months ago, I predicted that teams like Calgary um, would have a fight to get there, but I predicted that to go all the way to the Western Final. And obviously, judging by the series, they definitely fought hard, they played well, but it wasn't enough for them, and they ended up losing in Game 6 to the Dallas Stars, which beat the series 4-2. So there were a lot of players in the series that definitely were notable goal scorers. Some players that could have been seen more were definitely players like Tyler Sagan, but players like Jamie Benn, players like John Klingberg were definitely noted there on the ice and definitely pitched in well enough to provide not only the goals they needed to win the games, but a big 4-2 games series win. Because obviously the Dallas Stars, yes, they finished third in the West, but they were not expected really to go far in the playoffs, judging their previous year's experience. So that was kind of a surprise there that the Stars knocked off the Flames for me. So that has them going forward. And then, of course, we have the last series here in the West, which was the Vancouver Canucks versus the St. Louis Blues. Now, just like the Chicago and Vegas series, we thought this was, or at least I thought this was going to be the same way, as in Vegas would play the role of the Blues, because the Blues went all the way to the Cup last year, and I expected them to get to at least the conference final this year. But that was definitely not on the watch for the Vancouver Canucks, which definitely put a lot of spotlight on them in this first round here. So the Canucks ended up beating the St. Louis Blues in 6 games, another 4-2 win, and a big upset to the St. Louis Blues. Because not only did they still have a decent core amount of players that they had last year when they went for the Cup run, yeah, they lost some players like Joe Edmondson and gained players like Falk, but they should have been able to pull off a win here. And the fact that the Canucks not only outscored them in some games, but Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, a lot of notable players on the Canucks just completely threw out the stick and surprised a lot of the defensemen on the St. Louis Blues. So that was the first round there. So we had the Canucks going through, the Stars going through, the Avalanche going through, and the Golden Knights going through. So what we'll do now is we'll turn it over to Eric to give us the first round results of the Eastern Conference. Yeah, and then we'll go round by round from there.
All right, so as you just heard, that was the West, so now we got the East, and the East, as mentioned, or should be mentioned, all took place in the city of Toronto, in Canada, of course. And unlike in the West, where Edmonton failed to make the round, Toronto made the play. Oh, wait a second. That's right. Toronto fell in the play-in round.
Oh.
Poor Toronto. At least you didn't need to lose to Boston this year. It's okay.
The Raptors.
It's okay, Toronto. I had to. Take that, national anthem singer of Toronto.
Calling you out, Martina.
So there, of course, is, we already did, there was already a video up on the channel about the play-in round results, in case you haven't seen it. So that's how the teams are seeded. You already saw the upsets and all that good stuff. But, of course, like the West, there were definitely some upsets in the East. And the biggest upset was when the Montreal Canadiens pulled the upset over the Pittsburgh Penguins in embarrassing fashion, 3-1, if I remember correctly. So that pinned the Montreal Canadiens against the one-seeded Philadelphia Flyers. And it was a pretty close series. A lot of people were saying, okay, Philadelphia is going to sweep this series. And I'm like, nah, I don't think they will. And it was a close series. It was a nitty-gritty series. So if you watched or listened to the games, you could hear it. It was very defensive-heavy at times. And that was the series that neither team really wanted, but it just ended up being that way. So Philadelphia ends up winning that series 4-2. And what we saw Carter Hart have a lot of iffy games, and we saw, Carey Price just look pretty good most of the time. Carey Price faced a lot of shots, but the most goals he allowed in a single game was 3. Carter Hart, on the flip side, had a couple games where he allowed 4 goals and ended up getting pulled for Brian Elliott. So it was interesting because we actually had 3 shutouts in that series. And like I said, it was a pretty nitty-gritty matchup between the two teams. what it definitely showed is that the older players in Philadelphia were very quiet. Patrick mentioned before with the West, a lot of guys who excelled and underachieved. And really, Claude Giroux didn't look that good. Kevin Hayes didn't do all that much for Philadelphia. Hayes did good. Hayes did good, but it was Giroux and Couturier who was pretty quiet. I know Couturier had dealt with an injury, but still. And it just goes to show you the young kids really stood up for Philly. And then on Montreal's side, even though they lost this series 4-2, their young kids really showed up as well. Nick Suzuki looked very good for the Canadiens. He had 4 goals in the 6 games, which is very impressive. And then Kotkaniemi also looked very good for the Canadiens. He might not have had the elite goals, or he had a hat trick. So he did, I believe, also had 4 goals, but he was a little more streaky. He had one really good game, then a couple of good games, but not elite. So Kotkaniemi and Suzuki looked very good for Montreal, so there's a bright future there. However, they made a horrible trade in the past 24 hours that sent away Max Domi, who, yes, underachieved in the series, for Brent Seabrook. So I don't know what you're doing in Montreal right now, getting Seabrook inside for young players, but what do I know? I'm just a fan. I'm not a general manager. But again, the Canadiens looked very good. They played the Flyers in a very good series, 4-2. And then another upset was when we saw the Columbus Blue Jackets defeat the Toronto Maple Leafs. So then that meant Columbus was going to battle Tampa Bay. And I think we all remember game 1 of that series, Columbus versus Tampa Bay, goes into 5 overtimes. I just remember I go to work, and I go to work right around puck drop. And then I just basically finished my shift at work, and I find the game ended about 10, 15 minutes beforehand. Now I'm just like, are you kidding me? It was just such a really ridiculous long series, a long game. And then they end up playing 2 days later, but essentially at that point, it's like you already played 2.5 games when you're starting game 2. So Tampa Bay ends up losing game 2. It was again, it was kind of one of those series where you were expecting a lot of lag and tired players, and it wasn't as bad of a game as you'd expect. Now, in the first game, I forget who was in goal for Columbus. It was Elvis, I believe. No, it was who was in goal for Columbus in game 1? I don't remember.
It was not Elvis. Maurice
It was Jonas, right?
Jonas Corpusalo.
Corpusalo, okay, yeah, Corpusalo. So Corpusalo sets an NHL record for saves in a single game, at least in the playoffs, but he still gets saddled with the loss. So he looks pretty good. And then, they turn the tide game 2. They get the win, but then Tampa Bay says, you know what, that's enough. We were tired game 2, and they just go and they win the rest of the series. Game 5 ends up going into overtime, but it didn't matter. Tampa Bay wins that game. I actually was able to listen to that game, so I was pretty happy. We were definitely expecting Tampa Bay to win this series. It wasn't a good matchup for Columbus. And, Columbus offensively was surprisingly able to hang in there with Tampa Bay. And really, all 4 games that Columbus lost were only by a single goal. So that just shows a lot of credit to Columbus's defense. But the offense just wasn't there. And keep in mind, up to this point, Stamkos still hasn't played for the Lightning. So they are without their captain, Stamkos. We don't know if he's going to play, but we'll get to that later. So it was a lot of guys that really stood up for Tampa Bay. And nobody really, to me at least, really showed up. There were some good players that did what you'd expect. And, Braden Point, of course, Kucherov, Victor Hedman, they all looked good, but that's expected. I didn't really see or hear about any lesser-known players stepping up. Volevsky, of course, I should also mention him. He's looked very good. On Columbus's side, I mean, it was just a tough one for them. It was a tough series. It was a tough matchup. They definitely proved themselves, and I think next year Columbus has they're ready. They're ready to compete again. It's just going to come down to free agency. So then our next matchup was between the 3-seeded Washington Capitals and the sixth-seeded New York Islanders. Now, when we saw this matchup, we pretty much knew it was going to be a defensively heavy series because that's the way the Islanders dictate play. And that's exactly what happened, at least at the start. And Washington has a very good offensive core, as we know. Obviously, you have Ovechkin, arguably the top goal scorer of all time. And, John Carlson knows how to play as well on the offensive side. But they weren't able to click as well as they'd want to. They weren't really able to get everything to go. And even when the offense was clicking, Braden Holtby looked horrible in goal. He looked so bad. And the Islanders were able to take the series. They end up having a 3-0 series lead on the Capitals. Then they drop game 4, but then they end up taking game 5, so they win the series 4-1. And they end up embarrassing the Capitals in game 5 with a shutout. And it didn't look good for the Capitals at all. The Capitals looked lost, and there's a lot of rumors going around that now Holtby might be gone. That might have been his last series for the Capitals. And it just goes to show you that the Islanders can embarrass you. So it was pretty sad for the Capitals, The Islanders did what they do. They didn't necessarily have any amazing players other than Beauvillier. He looked very good in the series against Washington, and it's continued through the playoffs for him. But everyone else just did about how you'd expect. Varlamov did decent, Polak did decent, Brock Nelson did decent. So there weren't any major key players dominating for the Islanders. Lastly, in the first round at least, we have the Boston Bruins playing the Carolina Hurricanes. And this was a rematch of the Eastern Conference Finals from last year, in which Boston swept Carolina. This year, Carolina took game 2, but they still lost the series 4-1. So I remember right off the bat, we're watching this game, you're watching or listening to game 1, and it ends up going into double overtime. And everyone's like, are you kidding me? We just had a 5 overtime game in the last Eastern Conference game, and now we're in double overtime. And then Boston pretty much scored right at the beginning of the second OT, if I remember correctly. But the series was pretty close. Yes, it was 4-1, but every game was decided by 1 goal, excluding game 3, which was decided by 2 goals. So it was a close game, and honestly, the return of Dougie Hamilton for Carolina was big. He played very well. And then, of course, Aho and Teuvo Teravainen played well for Carolina. But the thing was, Boston is just a much better team than Carolina. Svechnikov also played well for Carolina. But, they weren't able to get it together. Their goaltending was really a big problem for Carolina. They weren't doing that good. They had to rotate their goalies just because they didn't have a goaltender number 1. Boston, on the flip side, Marjan looked very good in that series. Pasternak didn't do all that much. And McAvoy, he did what he could do. He was on the ice killing time, doing decent on penalties. I don't recall him making any stupid decisions. Now, the real thing with this series was we saw right before Game 3, Tuukka Rask just opts out, walks away about 3 hours before game time. So that's when Halak has to step in. And he obviously wasn't ready, but the team responded well, and they got the win. And they won, 3 straight games after Rask walked away. And we eventually found out what happened with Tuukka Rask. His daughter was in the hospital. We get that. We understand that. But just how the whole thing went, there's a lot of people saying that he might be gone from Boston. But, it was just a very interesting situation where Tuukka Rask just walks out in the middle of the bubble, which upset a lot of people. But Boston as a whole, their offense was looking decent in this series. Granted, it was against real questionable goaltending. But they did do what they did in the play-in round. They went 0-3, and they did kind of rebound. They showed themselves and that they're ready to play as they went on to round 2. So to recap, for round 1 in the East, we saw Philadelphia defeat Montreal, and Tampa Bay defeat Columbus. We saw the New York Islanders defeat the Capitals, and we saw Boston defeat Carolina, which set up the matchups of Philadelphia versus New York Islanders and Tampa Bay versus the Boston Bruins. So those are the Eastern Conference semifinals. I'm going to flip it back to Patrick so he can cover the Western Conference semifinals.
All right, so now on to the Western Conference semifinals, aka round 2 of the West. So round 2 of the West, we have the Vegas Golden Knights facing off against the 5th seeded Vancouver Canucks, as well as the Colorado Avalanche facing off against the 3 seeded Dallas Stars. So let's do the West here. So obviously we have Vegas and Vancouver. So this was going to be interesting because, like we said, Vegas coming off of that pretty decent 4-1 win over Blackhawks makes them feel controlling, makes them feel like they can definitely accelerate themselves to the conference finals. And now coming up against the number 5 seed team, Canucks, who have good players, like I said, Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser. We're talking about a really good whole lot of skill on the first 2 lines. But the question is, was that going to be enough for the Vegas Golden Knights with the physicality? And obviously we know Vegas has a very fast-paced game. So obviously going into game 1, the Vegas Golden Knights pulled off an easy shutout over the Canucks. The Knights scored 5 unanswered goals to take a 5-0 game 1 lead, which was really a tone setter because everybody was thinking if the next game is going to be like this, there could be some real problems and a potential sweep happening. But Robin Lehner recording his first playoff career shutout, and the Knights with a 5-0 win puts them in a really controlling environment going into game 2. So going into game 2, it's interesting because game 2 is almost like reverse. Game 2, the Canucks end up evening the series with a 5-2 win over Vegas. Now, obviously, this is a series that I think could have been a potential sweep if there was no such thing as a neutral site location. If they had been playing this with no pandemic and with, the home crowds, we know how amped up the Vegas crowd is in T-Mobile Arena. I feel like that crowd would have definitely intimidated the Canucks, and it would have been potentially a series sweep. So the Canucks end up evening the series at 1-1, and then it kind of sort of gets out of hand because going into game 3, Lehner ends up getting another shutout because they shut out the Canucks 3-0. So from there, it kind of just turns into Vegas's series, and Vegas ends up winning the series. Crazy thing, though, in 7 games, which was kind of a surprise. I thought it'd be like a 4 or 5 game one with a team like Vegas. So Vegas gets the win there. Lehner, obviously the strong backbone of that series for the Golden Knights. And then going on to the next series, so we have Vegas moving on there. To the conference finals, and then we have Dallas Stars versus the number 2. So we have the number 3 Dallas Stars versus the number 2 Avalanche. Now, a lot of people thought the Avalanche were definitely going to be a winner here over the Stars' lack of playoff experience, and they think the Stars kind of just got an easy win over the last series. So going into this one, we have game 1 where the Stars end up taking the victory in a 5-3 win. And one of the most popular players within the Dallas Stars and even up until now is right winger Alexander Radulov. He is one of the top players that's contributing right now with the Dallas Stars in terms of goals and in terms of assists. Yes, you can also notable Nathan McKinnon on the other team providing numerous goals and assists in this series, but it wasn't enough as injuries became a problem for the Avalanche, and many believe that's what cost them the series. This one did go to a 7-game series as well, because the Avalanche definitely put up a fight, and so did Dallas. But Dallas ended up squeaking past this one and going to the final against the Vegas Golden Knights. So this Western Conference final has the Vegas Golden Knights, number 1 seed, against the number 3 seed, Dallas Stars. And we'll get back to that just in a moment, as Eric will highlight the Eastern Conference semifinals.
All right, so the Eastern Conference semifinals were also interesting. So first thing was the 1 seed Flyers playing the 6 seed Islanders, and this was the one thing I was afraid of as a Flyers fan, because the Islanders are a very, very, very good matchup against the Flyers. And when I say good matchup, I mean in the Islanders' favor. The Islanders' way that they play just completely shuts down the Flyers for whatever reason. And the Islanders, if you were to match them up, nobody wanted to play them. And they just, again, the way the Flyers are built, it doesn't match up against the Islanders. The Islanders got their way. And right off the bat, the first game is a 4-0 shutout in the Islanders' favor. And then we get to game 2, and Philadelphia squeaks home a victory in overtime. But it's pretty apparent at this point that the Flyers' bigwigs still aren't doing anything. And this was the concerning part. So it's still all the young kids, just like in the Canadian series, that are doing stuff. And a lot of players start getting hurt. Abe Kubel goes down with an injury. Sean Couturier gets hurt and misses a few games. Kevin Hayes was dealing with an injury at this point in time. He constantly was blocking shots. Philip Myers gets hurt at some point in time, too. These are guys that miss chunks of time during games. So they really started to have to play guys like Derek Grant, who you never want to see on a playoff team, unless it's a reserve 4th line role. But they had to start playing him like the 3rd line. So that was already concerning enough. But the Islanders weren't really able to capitalize against the Flyers' injury-prone like 4th lines. They were doing good against the starting unit. And the Flyers' starting unit got so bad that they had to keep reshuffling it. And the Islanders, taking advantage of the reshuffling Flyers lineup, end up taking games 3 and 4 back-to-back nights. And at that point, it was apparent to me as a Flyers fan that I'm like, okay, I don't think the Flyers are going to be able to survive. Now, up to this point in time, as you know, the 2 Western Conference series went into, were 3-1 series leads. And this series is a 3-1 series lead. And just like the 2 series in the West, this series, I should say, ends up going to Game 7. The Flyers end up taking Games 5 and 6, both of which go into overtime. So at this point in time, the Flyers have won 3 games, all of which were in overtime. The Islanders have won 3 games, all of which were in regulation. So it's pretty apparent that the Islanders are the better team. And we get to Game 7, and the Islanders just shut out the Flyers again, just like the first game, 4-0. And that ends the Flyers season. But the Islanders, I'm not going to just say the Flyers blew it. The Islanders won it. This is one of those series that the Islanders won. The Flyers didn't lose it. The Islanders won it. And what I mean by that is the Islanders played much better than the Flyers did. And again, Brock Nelson had a real good series, and Varlamov looked very good for them. Even Thomas Greiss had a very good series. He stepped in Game 7, and he got that shutout save, the shutout win for the Flyers, for the Islanders. But the big thing was the Islanders' defense was stopping the Flyers from shooting. So that Game 7 victory, the Greiss only had to make 16 saves in a Game 7. That's embarrassing if you're the Flyers. You're giving all this money to players like James Reemsdyk, Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, and you only got 16 shots in 60 minutes. That's just embarrassing. And that's what it was. That was the common theme of that series. The Islanders were frustrating the Flyers, and that's what happened. So kudos to the Islanders. They would move on. In game 7, 4-3, all said and done. Then we have the other series was the 2-seed Tampa Bay Lightning taking on the 4-seed Boston Bruins. And this was something. So Boston would take Game 1. And at this point in time, people who are riding the Boston hype train are saying, this is great, Tuukka Rask opted out, and now we're 4-0, we're looking really good. We took 3 games in a row after Tuca opted out against the Hurricanes. Now we took game 1 here against the Lightning. That was all she wrote for Boston's hope. So game 2 goes into overtime, and Tampa Bay squeaks out the victory. A little bit of a heartbreaker. I was listening to that game. Then you get game 3, and this was just the absolute embarrassing humiliation of a 7-1 loss. And I remember I wanted to text Patrick something, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bite my tongue because the Flyers are still playing. But, it wasn't a good series. It wasn't a good game for Boston. They looked embarrassed. They looked lost. They looked confused. And Tampa Bay ends up, taking game 4, which, just like the other 3 series, puts this series at 3-1. However, unlike the other 3 series, Boston blew game 5, which eliminated them 4-1. So Boston was the only team that did not force game 6, or game 7 for that matter. And game 5 did go into double overtime, so there was hope for Boston, but Tampa Bay was too much. Now, a lot of Boston's, trade deadline acquisitions just really hurt the team. Kasha didn't look that good. Nick Ritchie drew some really boneheaded penalties from what I saw. So Boston just really didn't look that good. And the big problem for Boston, too, was the defense wasn't doing what you wanted it to do. So they weren't able to take advantage of a Tampa Bay team that was without its captain. And Tampa Bay was just saying, okay, we're going to play our game. And Boston couldn't do anything to stop it. But, Boston just didn't look that hot. The fact that Krejci ended up leading the team in assists through the playoffs, that's kind of embarrassing if you're a Boston fan. You'd want it to be Pasternak or Marjan or Bergeron, something like that. But again, this team did better than expected, especially if you consider the fact that Tuukka Rask opted out after 2 games of the playoffs. So just really sad. And Tampa Bay was a good matchup against Boston as well. So Tampa Bay matched up well against Boston from the start. So again, to recap, the Lightning defeated the Bruins and the Islanders defeated the Flyers, which means the Eastern Conference Finals was going to be the 6th-seed New York Islanders versus the 2-seeded Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm going to pass it back to Patrick to cover the Western Conference Finals for round 3.
All right, so going into the Western Conference Finals, the Vegas Golden Knights against the Dallas Stars. And a lot of Vegas fans are definitely looking at this as a chance for Vegas in only their 3rd season to go back to the Stanley Cup final. But little did they know, it was not in store for them from the team from Dallas. So, as we know, this was going to be a very interesting series. It was either going to be a huge upset or it was going to be a potential chance for Dallas to go back to the finals for the first time since I believe the year was 2000. So let's go ahead and look at this series. So obviously, everybody thought Vegas is going to get a good start, and the crazy thing was Dallas ended up taking Game 1, barely shutting out the Vegas Golden Knights 1-0. Anton Khudobin was mainly the goalie in net for this series, and he was solid. John Klingberg, like I said, was definitely a key player, and the key goalie. Well, actually, let's kind of switch back and forth between Lehner and Fleury for the Golden Knights. So Dallas took Game 1 with a score shutting him out 1-0. So it was interesting going into Game 2. What was going to happen? Was it going to be a big rebound from Vegas and kind of shut him out and slap him back in the face to make an even series, or was Dallas going to keep it on the pressure? And luckily for Vegas, players such as Paul Stastny, Thomas Nosek, Mark Stone contributed to what would be a 3-0 win to even the series 1 game apiece. So now we got a 1-1 game apiece going into Game 3. And obviously it's kind of thinking, all right, whoever gets this game here and this Game 3 here will probably most likely try to take control of the series. So, and that would be the Dallas Stars. So Dallas coming out really strong. This game going into overtime. Dallas taking a 3-2 win in overtime. Anton Khudobin with 38 saves in that game. Goals by Radulov, which I said in the last series was huge. Um, and many other Dallas Stars players like Klingberg, Jamie Benn. Not really too much Sagan, which I would like to see more of in this upcoming series, which we'll get to. But the contributor, yeah, so this is a huge win, a 3-2 overtime win by the Stars, gives them a 2-1 series lead. So going into game 4, this could be a big difference here. Because going into game 4, if Dallas wins this, they're one game away from going to the Stanley Cup final series. So I was thinking coming into this game, I was thinking that, you know what, I think Vegas is going to bounce back, and I think this is going to be a 7-game series. So I think that Vegas was going to bounce back and do whatever it takes to win the game. It may not be a blowout, it may not be a really really close game, but I just saw them as coming back and winning to tie the series 2 games apiece. But it wasn't possible because Dallas wouldn't give up on their offensive players, and Dallas was just playing just as fast or faster of a game than Vegas was. So Dallas comes out of this game with a 2-1 win. Hudobin once again huge, and Jamie Benn once again a goal in this game. So now Dallas has clearly got a 3-1 series lead. And I remember when I watched this game, I was like, oh my god, Dallas a 3-1 series lead. People like my father, when they saw this, they thought it was the Vegas having 3-1. When they saw the series, I was like, wait, it's Dallas? I'm like, yeah, dude, it's Dallas. And he was very surprised, and I was like, yeah, and so am I, because none of us saw Dallas going this far. So here we go into game 5, Dallas with a 3-game lead, and it's all on the table now for Vegas. It's either all or nothing. Winning game back by game, winning the next 2 games to force a game 7. Was it possible? Now this game is interesting because we're looking at game 5 where Vegas started off with a lead. Vegas started with a 1 goal in the first period to take 1 goal lead. They ended up getting another goal in the third period, but little did they know, Dallas in the last 10 minutes of the game would not only tie the game, but make the game go to overtime. Once again, another goal by Jamie Benn. Gurianov had a goal as well, and this went to overtime. So now it's literally do or die for the Vegas Golden Knights. Their season is on the line. They need to win this game to force a game 6. Did it happen? No. Dallas prevailed once again and pulled a huge upset that nobody, not even Vegas fans, saw coming. So I'm sure they believed their team could easily come back still with the offensive capabilities they have. But Dallas comes up huge. A 3-2 overtime win pushes them through to the Stanley Cup final. Like I said, Hudobin is their backbone right now. He's their goalie backbone going into the Stanley Cup final series, which starts tomorrow. Jamie Benn is huge. The left winger is a huge influence on where they are now, his goals. Klingberg, Sagan needs to show up more. And they have many other offensive players, and their defense is playing well. So they're definitely looking strong, and they're definitely confident going into this series against the opponent that Eric will tell you about now. Boy, and he'll also tell you the series that lead up to it, going in from this Eastern final.
So the Eastern final was set to be a very strong, very good matchup. You had a very defensively heavy, great defensive playing team in New York versus the offensive heavy, talented, extremely talented Tampa Bay team that up to this point had won 2 series against 2 tough opponents. Well, against Columbus and a tough opponent in Boston without their captain. So everyone's thinking, okay, what's going to happen? You know, the Islanders just played a game 7, and Tampa Bay is the only team coming into this round with a little bit of rest as they had beat Boston in 5. Well, we get game 1, and needless to say, fears of a defensive-heavy series were put to rest very quick as the Islanders, yes, the Islanders scored 2 goals. Tampa Bay scored 8 goals in game one. And the positive for Tampa Bay was basically everybody got involved in the goal scoring. Kucherov, Point, Hedman, McDonough, everyone scored, Palat even. They were all getting goals, and that's what they needed. They wanted good offense from everybody. They don't want one player to carry the team. They want it from every single line, all these different players, your defense, your offense. They wanted everyone to score. And once they did that, it showed that Tampa Bay is for real. So the problem with this series, at least game one in particular, was there was a lot of sloppy play and a lot of pointless penalties, specifically on the Islanders. The Islanders took a lot of penalties, and I know there were a couple fights even in this series, but the Islanders just didn't seem to want the series as much. At least game one, they kind of gave up. So at this point, we go to game two, and the Islanders are down 1-0, and they're thinking, okay, it's time to make it or break it. We need to win game two. Not going to happen. Tampa Bay ends up taking game two, 2-1. Now, Braden Point ends up getting hurt in this game, and that's key. So the real surprise to me, at least, was seeing Matt Martin score a goal a minute and a half into game two. I remember I'm just like, wait, Matt Martin? When I got the notification, I double checked. I'm like, Matt Martin scored a goal? Seriously? In the Eastern Conference Finals? Okay. Now, at that point, a lot of players start coming back for Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay ends up rebounding. Victor Hedman scores a goal towards the end of the first. Second period's rather uneventful, but Kucherov scores a goal right before we would have gotten overtime to break the tie. 2-1, Tampa Bay wins. Now again, Braden Point getting hurt really kind of slowed down Tampa Bay. So now we go into game three, and the Islanders take advantage of Braden Point being hurt and take game three 5-3. Now the game was again interesting as we saw a lot of different players score, but for Tampa Bay, for example, they had again Tyler Johnson and Sergachev score, and Palat. So again, they're getting a lot of different offense from a lot of different players, which is what they want. But again, in this game, the Islanders take it with a bunch of different players scoring. Now, unfortunately for the Islanders, Barzal hasn't done much at this point in the playoffs, and he still doesn't score a goal in this series, or in this game. But, Beauvillier is finally scoring again in this series, and Brock Nelson, Jean-Gabriel Pageau gets a goal. So finally, the Islanders are looking like, okay, maybe this is our series. We're coming back. We just beat Tampa 5-3, and we're going into Game 4. So we get to Game 4, and Game 4 is another interesting game, but this time the Islanders lose. So right off the bat, we see, the Islanders score pretty quickly in the second, or about midway through the second. 15 seconds later, Tampa Bay scores. So they turn the game from, 0-0 to 1-1 after 15 seconds. And then 8 seconds after that, or 12 seconds after that, Tampa Bay scores again. So all of a sudden, this defensive-minded game for the first half of the first period turns into a 2-1 lead in a matter of, 30 seconds of game time. And Tampa Bay just didn't let go. Tampa Bay ends up winning that game 4-1. So at this point, Tampa Bay is in a position where they are up in the series 3-1. And that's exactly what they wanted. So now we get to Game 5. And this was an interesting game that Islanders knew they had to win. And up to this point, they still haven't seen that much from Matthew Barzal, but they also haven't had to deal with Steven Stamkos. So the Islanders still have a chance, and they know they have to win Game 5, obviously. If you don't win Game 5, you're done. You're going home. You lose the series 4-1. So they show up, and in the first period, they score a goal, a power play goal, and then Tampa responds in the second with a goal of their own, and then we end up going into overtime tied at 1. We end up needing a second overtime to decide this game, where Jordan Eberle hits the game winner in the second overtime. Now Varlamov had a decent game for the Islanders here, but again, at this point, it's pretty obvious that they're probably getting outmatched and outplayed. So we head to Game 6, Tampa Bay up in the series 3-2, and Tampa Bay would... It was an interesting game. So right off the bat, the Islanders score pretty early in the game, and a couple minutes later, Tampa Bay responds. And I'm working at this point, so I told Patrick, hey, text me updates in this game. So he texted me pretty much, halfway through the first, it's tied at 1 apiece. And I'm like, wow, okay. We end up not seeing anything else, and I end up getting home in time to see the end of the third. And it goes into overtime, and then in overtime, we get about halfway through overtime, 13 minutes in, and Anthony Corelli, according to my phone, scored the game-winning goal. And I'm listening to the game at this point, and I see Cirelli scores. And at this point, Tampa Bay wins the series 4-2, and Stamkos comes out to celebrate the Eastern Conference Championship. What do they call it? The Prince of Wales Trophy. They end up tell me this: did they touch the Prince of Wales Trophy or no?
So they did not lift it up or anything. Pretty much, they came over, like the captain or whatever, took a picture with it, and then the rest of the team came over and they just gathered around it, didn't touch it, and just took a picture, and that was pretty much it.
That's what I figured. Okay, got you. So, they're celebrating, but they don't touch the Prince of Wales Trophy. No, 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 no. You don't want to do that. Superstitions. See, I couldn't watch the end of it, but it was definitely cool hearing Cirelli score the game-winning goal. And it sent the Islanders home, which, trust me, as a Flyers fan, I was very happy to see the Islanders get eliminated after they eliminated the Flyers. So, So, again, in this series, Tampa Bay would win 4-2. So to do a quick recap of how the teams as a whole got here, we're going to have to look back here and give me 1 second. So Dallas in the West defeated the Calgary Flames 4-2 in the first round, took a 7-game series against the Avalanche, which was a shocking upset to a lot of people. A lot of people had Colorado as the Western Conference champions, and then took out Vegas in 5, which was another shocking upset. All of that was covered by Patrick, which put the 3-seeded Dallas Stars in the Stanley Cup Finals. And Tampa Bay took out the Columbus Blue Jackets 4-1 in the first round, knocked out the Bruins 4-1 in the second round, and then took out the Islanders 4-2 in the Eastern Conference Finals, which set the 2-seeded Tampa Bay Lightning to the Stanley Cup Finals. And this is going to be a doozy of a Stanley Cup. I will let Patrick give his comments before, so go right ahead. The stage is yours.
All right, so this game starts, as we know, tomorrow night, Game 1, Stanley Cup Final, between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Dallas Stars. This will be interesting. Tampa Bay Lightning, the last time they won the Cup, if I'm not mistaken, was 2007? 2007 or 2009? I don't remember. I think it was 2007. 2009 was the Penguins, I think. I'm pretty sure. And then the last time the Stars won the Cup, I believe, was 1999. Let me just double check this real quick. Yep, 1999 season. So let's get that last period going. So this is a hard one. Obviously, the series on both sides have been very unexpected. Vegas, I thought, would be in this position now to play teams like either the Lightning, the Bruins, or the Flyers. I thought those were the top teams there. Obviously, we got the Lightning. From the West, I did not think it was going to be the Stars. I thought it was going to be either Vegas, Calgary, or maybe Vancouver. But what do you know? 2020 hit us with this, and now we got the Stars and Tampa Bay Lightning. And honestly, if I have to choose, if you ask me right off the bat, who do you think would win the Cup 2020 right now, Tampa Bay Lightning or the Dallas Stars, I definitely would have to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not only do they have a lot of playoff experience the last couple years, they have really dominant offensive players. Whether it's Nikita Kucherov, they have players like Victor Hedman, and they have other players that they've gotten recent acquisitions from the past year, whether it's Zach Bogosian or Pat Maroon. Pat Maroon could be a back-to-back Stanley Cup champion if they win this. He won the Cup last year with the St. Louis Blues. And Bogosian are definitely good physical presence. Obviously, what will be interesting to see is the matchup in terms of pace of this game. Obviously, we know that Dallas Stars are a fast-paced team. Can the Lightning be a fast-paced team? Of course they can. But will they be able to hold up to Dallas's pace? Because I feel like the first two games are obviously going to tell where the series will go. And it could be a 2-0 series to um, the Lightning, in my opinion, with their forward endurance and their decent defense that can hold up strong players on the Dallas side, such as Klingberg, Tyler Seguin, and then other players like Jamie Benn. So yeah, I definitely would have to say Tampa Bay. How many games? Obviously, we're playing a best of 7. I would have to say in 5 or 6 games. Will it be physical? Of course. I'm expecting the first 2 games to be mad physical. Um, it's funny because I was kind of hoping that the Islanders would be facing the Knights because I would like to see Matt Martin fight Ryan Reeves. But I guess that's not going to happen, which is kind of a bummer because that would be great for entertainment and views. But yeah, so I definitely think the Lightning will win this within 5 or 6 games. Of course, it'll be hard fought by the Stars, and the Stars should still definitely be proud of where they've gotten to this year, especially with shocking the Knights' elimination in the Western Final. So that's my prediction. And let's turn it over to Eric to get his prediction.
So, of course, I'm going to address the elephant in the room here, which is Steven Stamkos. Now, Stamkos has been effectively ruled out for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, which is tomorrow. However, the Lightning are leading the fans on yet again, and probably messing with Dallas too, by saying, oh, we haven't ruled him out yet for the series. Just rule him out. We all know he's probably not playing in the Stanley Cup. Come on. But at the same time, even if he's at 90%, they're going to throw him out there just so he can play in the Stanley Cup in his probable Hall of Fame career. It's going to be interesting. Stamkos, I don't know if he's going to play in the Stanley Cup. Obviously, as a hockey fan, you want to see him play in the Stanley Cup. And he's going to be the key contributor to me if he plays. How good / how bad will he be? Will he be scoring right off the bat? Or is he going to be slow, hampered, and Dallas takes advantage of him? We will see. It's going to be interesting. He's been, as Patrick's favorite thing in the Stanley Cup playoffs is, unfit to play since the start of the playoffs. So it's going to be something. Will Stamkos play? Jury's out on that, but we're all waiting for Stamkos to come back. Other than Stamkos, it's going to be an interesting series. So, to my understanding, they played once in the 2019-2020 season, but this was back in December, and Dallas took the victory. I believe at that point in time, Stamkos and Hedman were hurt. I could be wrong on that. And yes, that helps Dallas, and I believe the game was in Dallas as well. So, again, like Patrick had mentioned, the two teams have not been in the Cup for a little while. Dallas hasn't won it since, you said, 99-2000. Tampa hasn't won it since 2004, 2005, I think it was. If not that, it was 03-04. I forget which one was locked out and which one actually happened. I think it was the 04-05 was locked out, so I think it was the 03-04 season when Tampa won. But it's been a while since Tampa's won. It's been a while since Dallas has won. Both have won more recently than the Flyers and the Atlanta Braves, so just got to throw that out there.
Oh, come on.
But, it's interesting. This is going to be a very close, a very physical finals. I agree with you on that one. But do I agree with you that the Lightning are going to win? Yes, I do. I think they're going to win in 6 games. If you watch our original NHL playoffs predictions, I do have Tampa Bay winning the Stanley Cup against Edmonton, granted. But I do have Tampa winning. I'm confident in Tampa Bay. They're a good team. They're a talented team. They have a very strong offense, obviously. Braden Point, is going to be a key contributor, but Nikita Kucherov will be the star for Tampa Bay if they win the Cup. He needs to contribute. Victor Hedman needs to contribute, and of course, Valevsky needs to make a lot of great saves. Now, on Dallas' side, it's going to be interesting because Radulov's looked pretty good, and obviously the key player on that team is Ben. So Jamie Benz looked very good, and he needs to look better, I should say. But if he can contribute, and if he can do as good as we've seen in the past, it's going to be a very close series. If Jamie Benn can contribute like we've seen in previous years, Radulov continues as great as he's been, and we just see everyone in Dallas playing very well, Dallas can force this series to go farther than you'd expect. But I just don't think it's a great matchup. The goaltending matchup heavily favors Tampa Bay, at least on paper. The coaching heavily favors Tampa Bay. The offense heavily favors Tampa Bay. Defensively, Dallas gets a slight edge, but if you go with offensive defensemen, Tampa Bay is heavily favored. So it's just going to be a very interesting series, and I won't be shocked if it's a sweep, but I don't think it will be a sweep in Tampa's favor. I think you're going to see Tampa win this in 6. I think it's going to be a 3-1 series lead. I think it's going to be a 1-0 Tampa lead, then maybe 2-0. Then I think Dallas will take a game. Then I think Tampa will make it 3-1. Then I think Dallas will take game 5. And then I think and I think Tampa will win game 6, win the Cup, finally, win the Stanley Cup again for the second time in its history. I believe they've only won it once before. And it'll be good. It'll be good for Tampa. Obviously, since they knocked out the Islanders, I'm rooting for Tampa this year. I know Patrick's probably not rooting for Tampa, but let's just say, first things first, Hunter, if you see this video, we were dead wrong about the Dallas Stars. Dallas did pretty good this year, so we were wrong on that one. So it is what it is. We were wrong. Fortunately for me, I actually will at least be able to see the first 4 games of this series. I don't know when game 5 will be. Let me see if I can pull up the schedule. But it's going to be a very good series. I'm excited to watch this series. I'm going to try to watch it to the best of my ability. Game 5 will be... All right, I'm in line where I will be able to watch games 1 through 6 if they happen. So I'll be watching these games. I'll be excited. Obviously, I wish the Flyers were in it, but it is what it is. Hopefully, they don't go to game 7 because I don't want to miss that game. I'd honestly consider calling out of work, but I didn't say that if anyone from work's listening here. It's going to be a good series, though. I do think Tampa has the edge. Tampa's just a better offensive team, and physically, Dallas can win this series if they play a physical game, if they can re-aggravate Braden Point's injury, if Stamkos doesn't come back, if you can re-aggravate Hedman's injury, Dallas has a good chance of winning. But obviously, you don't want to win by playing dirty unless you're, a Boston team. Boston's known for cheating. Hold the Bruins. I won't be trashing the Bruins on that one before Patrick starts calling me out here. So Boston's known for cheating. Unless you're a Boston fan, you don't want to win by cheating. So it's going to be a very close series, and I think Tampa Bay will win this in 6. That's my viewpoint, and I'm looking forward to this. Definitely looking forward to this.
All right. So there you have it. That's Eric's prediction. And one thing I want to note that I don't think I pointed out is obviously, so last year when the Blues won the Cup, I don't know if you remember, but Craig Berube, their head coach, was rather new. They're on the same plate here with the Dallas Stars. This guy was also brought in because they had fired Montgomery back, I don't remember if it was at the beginning of the season or earlier this season. But so they're both, last year and this year, they're both coming from a team that was previously changed coaching staff. So it'd be interesting, like you said, how to see, obviously, John Cooper, the coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, with lots more experience. And it was 2004, by the way, that the Lightning last won the Cup with head coach John Tortorella. So, like I said, we'll have to see what comes down to it. We're excited to see how the series turns out. If it goes to 7 games, that would be pretty awesome. Um, so we'll have to see how that goes. So it's a game one is tomorrow night.
So Montgomery was fired in late 2019, early 2020,
Yep.
and we
Okay.
know it was the whole DUI thing, so he checked into rehab. And it's interesting that you mentioned the Blues because I don't know if you heard this, but Montgomery was actually hired by the Blues as an assistant coach really recently.
Interesting.
So
I knew he was hired. I didn't
it's
know
very
by who it was
interesting.
by.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, and that's just where we're at. But it's gonna be something. So this series will be good. And also, I didn't mention it when I was talking about the Flyers. Let's just take a moment to reflect on the fact that Oscar Lindblom, who was diagnosed with cancer in, I believe it was December, he returned in the playoffs for the Flyers. Let's just take a moment to reflect upon the fact that he returned to the ice after, cancer, after 9 months. That's just insane. I just had to say it, amazing. But go Tampa Bay. That's all I'm going to say at this point. Go Tampa Bay.
All right. So we'll keep everyone posted via social media. Like I said, at the channel banner and stuff, there's the links for the Instagram page and the Twitter. Um, and most likely we'll give updates and stuff about a score outcome for tomorrow's game, and the best team will win it. As we know, Eric does daily uploads of other videos involving either baseball, football, and together sometimes we do hockey videos like this one. Is there any other video comments you want to talk about for upcoming videos or anything real quick?
Oh, I have one thing to ask you. Who are you rooting for, Dallas or Tampa?
Oof. Honestly, I'd say Dallas.
Ooh, so
Honestly,
they're
I
not
kind of
that
just want
lost.
to see Tampa Bay get upset again. Like just like
Well, I mean, we already
last
did
year
better
they
than
got
last
swept, but
year.
last year they got swept in the first round by Columbus. This year they're gonna go all the way through, and I'm hoping they're gonna lose in the final. Maybe they'll get swept by the Stars. Who knows? That'd be such an embarrassing thing. Like I think their era of like Stanley Cup potential would just go away if they got swept in the final.
Oh, I think this is really their last true year of competing for the cup. So,
Yes, I mean Kucherov isn't that old.
yeah, but
They still got prime
Stamkos
players.
and
Yeah, Stamkos is always injured though. They're playing a lot of times without him. So I
true,
still remember
true.
that time I was watching a Bruins game and Milan Lucic broke his leg on the post. That was funny. But
Ooh, ooh, wow. Okay.
what? That was a little revenge thing because that was a really physical game and they had to toss Lucic around. Lucic just shoved them into the far side post of like it might have been Rask or Hudobin at the time. I don't remember who it was, but yeah, it was just lying there, and then they had to get paramedics to get him off, and turns out he had a broken leg. I was like, man, honestly, I didn't want him to break his leg, of course, but he got injured way worse than we thought, so he was out like the rest
You
of the
just
season.
said that was funny.
Hey, it was funny because it was like bad karma. It was
Hey,
like bad karma.
all I'm gonna say is LA Montreal against Boston.
All right. So is there any last
Yeah.
comments you want to say about any upcoming videos or anything like that
We'll
before we get
definitely
off?
be doing a video of sorts after the Stanley Cup is decided and the trophy is awarded to one of the two teams. And hopefully we see Dallas on the bench crying about the loss because Tampa Bay hoists the trophy over Dallas. But just basically stay tuned. Definitely check out our channel. We have a lot of videos that are going up here and there. Just started our rant series earlier today, so definitely check that out. We're going to definitely discuss every team in the Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, and National Football League, so it's going to be exciting. We did the New England Patriots today. Much longer video than any other one will be, I promise you that already. But it was fun, so Other than that, nothing else that I really gotta say. Anything you gotta say?
Not really. I guess I'll end it here. Stay tuned for more videos and updates via social media. Thanks for joining me, Eric, for this, and we'll
Thank
have
you.
many updated videos on this. Feel free to comment, rate, subscribe. Shout out the channel to any people you know that love sports or anything, because we cover most major sports. And there will also be a video coming up within the next few weeks when there's an NBA final series determined. Right now they're playing the conference finals. So when we get that final series set up, I'll do a video about that, a quick rundown of that, and I'm already thinking I know who it's going to be, but we'll have that set when we go. So thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and see you later.